Going on, everybody? I wanted to make a video in regards to one of the cruxes of some of the things that you're going through, some of the things that are causing you problems and issues, and why these things are very simple fixes. There's a lot of information out here, and we have until we understand what we're actually going through, we can't really do much to change our condition. And with that being said, I'm going to talk about my fragrance today, which is Original Santal, which is one of my favorite Creed fragrances. And we're going to go to undefined entity legal definition. Okay. Each one of us, we've heard this phrase and it's been called straw man. Okay. And a lot of times when you hear that phrase, it sounds crazy. Like there's a straw man or there's a legal entity or a legal person. Get out of here with that foolishness. But it's a reality. Okay, when you're entering into contracts and agreement, when there's an ambiguity or an unexpressed relationship in an agreement, this can go and cause you a lot of problems. It's the same thing with traffic tickets. It's the same thing with mortgages, credit cards, repossessions, loans, all of this. It's all under the fact, the reason why the banks or the financial institutions can use you or play you as if you have no legal rights is because they treat you as an unsecured creditor. Okay. So I'm going to show you what an unsecured creditor is, and we'll get back to what I was talking about. Okay. So I'm going to do a quick overview of this for you. So an unsecured creditor is a lender or a creditor who has not received any specific assets as collateral for a loan or debt. So when you go to the bank and you make a general deposit in the bank, this is why if you have certain bank accounts, you will receive an interest payment. So the reason why you're receiving an interest payment is because you're an unsecured creditor, and you're not a creditor that can demand that you're compensated, whether you're compensated in uh, you're getting the money from your negotiable instruments or drafts, because the bank doesn't actually pay you for your checks. When you deposit a check in the bank, you're not getting paid. What they're doing is they're cashing the check, and then they go through the Federal Reserve, or they go through the ACH system or the Treasury system, however they structure their business. Okay, most likely they're going to go through, NACHA or do an ACH payment, which means they're going to use the Federal Reserve. Now, remember, when you get a loan, they don't always go to the Federal Reserve because they don't always have to. Okay, you're the one that they're using to draw, but once you make your payments, then they're going through the Federal Reserve. You see what I'm saying? Because they use the ACH system, the NACHA system, and then they process the payments as EFTs. Okay. This means that they have no lien or security interest on the debtor's property. Okay. So since you don't have a lien on your vehicle, the bank puts a lien on the vehicle, and then they claim that they are entitled to enforce an agreement when their lien is a separate agreement from the initial agreement. Get it? Their claim ranks lower than secured creditors in cases of bankruptcy or insolvency. See, insolvency just means you can't pay the debt. So in if you're an unsecured creditor, or you're basically a party to an agreement, and in the agreement they have prima facie evidence that says that you have to hop, skip, and jump every time they send you a letter, and then you send them a letter and they do nothing. The reason why is because your status, you're not asserting it in claims, you're not escalating it. Okay. So look, unsecured creditors, so we'll elaborate. So unsecured creditors rely solely on the debtor's promise to repay the debt, unlike secured creditors who have an asset or property as collateral. So when you get a car loan, they treat it as if they're lending the car out to you. Look, lower priority. In bankruptcy, unsecured creditors are typically paid after secured creditors have been satisfied with their collateral. Types of unsecured creditors. Common example include credit card companies. So a credit card company is an unsecured creditor. That means that they do not have the ability to collect. Suppliers, some cash advance companies, and employee owed wages. So, recovery methods. If a debtor fails to repay, unsecured creditors may need to sue and win a judgment before being able to collect on the debt. What did they just say? A unsecured creditor needs a security to actually enforce the debt. So that means if you actually default on a credit card, then they can't collect that. That's why they go to court and sue you, even though the agreement says that they can't, which means that they breached the agreement and you never broke up or brought it up that, hey, by suing me, you breached the agreement, and default them and use that as an affirmative defense. In bankruptcy, they may receive a portion of the remaining assets after the creditors are paid, or they may not receive anything at all, depending on the situation. Example, if a business goes bankrupt and a bank with a mortgage on the business property, uh, a secured creditor will be paid from the sale of that property. So you have to secure your interest in any sale or transfer for it to be work. So a lot of times when you're asking, how do I endorse an instrument? How do I negotiate an instrument? That's why I created the qualified endorsement video, because all you have to do is follow the guidelines under the UCC and comply with what an instrument needs under the UCC, and then endorse it without recourse. Okay. And then you have to have a lien or a claim against that. You have to set up your own set of books. Okay. It's not just endorsing a negotiable instrument. It's not just endorsing a remittance coupon. You have to know how to set up your own books and enforce your instruments. Okay. Any remaining funds will be used to pay unsecured creditors if they are available. So when you open up a bank account, they're treating you as an unsecured creditor because you do not have a claim against the signature or the proceeds in the agreement or the transactions. So you don't have a claim against anything. When you're getting into an agreement, there's their side of the agreement and it's your side of the agreement. You need to know how to enforce your side of the agreement. Okay. When you send letters to the bank and the financial institution, most of you guys don't scan your letters in. You don't keep them. You don't date them. You don't show how they're sent. You have to keep records like a business. So we're going to get into why you're having some of the problems. Okay. And this is why it's easier for some people to say, hey, you got to get your birth certificate and you got to authenticate your birth. None of that has to do with anything. When you have a birth certificate, I've already done a video on this saying that your birth certificate is a trust certificate. This is what opens the trust. Your death certificate collapses the trust. That's why I figured out when I went to court and I used to look for probate properties, because you can make a lot of money flipping probate real estate. So look, in legal context, an undefined entity refers to a situation where a business or an organization's legal status is not clearly defined or recognized by law. So now you wonder why when you go into court, they bull over you because they don't really know what your legal status is. Now, some people may tell you have to say you're a living person. Some people might say you're the paramount security interest holder, but you have to have documentations filed prior or during the court that are entered into the court and that the judge takes judicial notice of over objection to enforce your legal status. Okay. You can't just file a document and just be like, you guys didn't look over my documents. You have to look at how to get that into the record. Okay. The organization's legal status is not clearly defined or recognized by law. Okay. Potentially leading to ambiguity in its rights, responsibilities, and liabilities. Okay. So you can make a declaration of clear legal status. You can clear up the ambiguity in rights and liabilities in the agreement. You can clear up, you can settle anything for potential disputes ahead of time. You don't have to wait until you're in default. Okay. So lack of clear legal status, an undefined entity lacks a specific legal framework or recognition, meaning it's not clearly categorized as a sole proprietorship. Okay. So you can do business as a sole proprietorship and still be yourself. So that means you can do business in your personal and still have a business as a sole proprietor. You don't have to go and set up get an EIN number, but you can get an EIN number and do business through your EIN number and have your social security number. So that means you will have two sets of books you can run. So you can run your business's books and you can run your personal books. Thus meaning if you get into debt, you can transfer business debt to your business and then use that to extinguish the debt or your trust or your other entity. Okay. Partnerships. When you get married, what do you think that is? That is a legal partnership. Who said that you have to go through the state? Why wouldn't you just form a corporation or form a trust? See, what people have to understand is this. The world doesn't work how you want it to work. It works how it works. So if you're sitting here expecting the world to come into your own vision or your own belief, you're going to be sitting there a long time. Okay, so you have to understand that people have these systems that have been built for years. So just learn the rules of the game. I mean, we're not going to be here that long anyway. You see what I'm saying? So, corporation, okay? So, when you're dealing with these corporations or businesses, you don't have a legal status that the corporation has to represent or respect. So, if you think about the credit card transactions you're in, what makes those funny is because the bank doesn't give you anything for those transactions. What happens is when the person goes out and they use the credit card, they create the credit. Okay. You're creating credit, but you're not getting the ability to create credit to settle or set off the obligation of credit. But that's what you applied for in the agreement, if you understand. So when you go out and you go buy, like, say you take your access device or so-called credit card and swipe it, once that magnetic pull happens, it's the energy that creates the amount of money for the transaction. So you float the amount. The bank doesn't give you that amount. You created it. That's why when you go into certain places, you have to sign a receipt. In some places you don't. They'll just electronically take it based off your agreement. And if you read the bottom of your receipt, it'll say it, but most people are not going to read that. Or limited liability company. Okay. So when you don't have your rights in an agreement specified or your status in the agreement specified, then the lender is not going to listen to you. And this is a thing that I've seen myself that I was like, oh man, this is something I should have brought to the public a long time ago. I have private courses that go over this, but I never brought it to the public. So ambiguity in rights and liabilities. Without a defined legal status, the entity's ability to enter contracts, own property, or be held liable for debts or actions becomes uncertain. You see what I'm saying? So now, when you're dealing with these people and you're doing business as an individual could be a corporation, a trust, a natural person, etc. So they don't know who they're dealing with. You see what I'm saying? So even if you say I'm the natural person, you got to actually have a position when you're saying the natural person. I'm the natural person acting as boom. You see what I'm saying? I didn't understand this until I started reading. There's a Bible verse that I ended up reading today, and I'll go over it. And it'll kind of specify like when you're writing stuff and when you're speaking, you really need to be very, very clear. Okay. So whenever you're creating these these entities, you're creating an undeclared trust, and that generally, you know, refers to a trust that's not expressly created by a written document or a declaration. Okay. So when you're in an agreement, there's a reason why I did the video where I was talking about the Declaration of Independence. Okay. The Declaration of Independence did not start America. It gave the people who signed the Declaration of Independence their independence. It was a motion. Okay. But rather implied or created by operation of law. Remember, These are also known as implied trust. That's why I said that you are acting as a indentured trustee on an agreement, and you're not receiving any benefits or compensation from the agreement, and you're acting as an indentured trustee. And somebody's in my comments like, you did the Indentured Trustee Act. I know that each business has an indentured trustee. That business, that indentured trustee does not have to deal with you because it's the bank's indentured trustee unless you clarify your status. So, and further categorized as constructive trust and resulting as trust. Constructive trust arise to prevent unjust enrichment, often found in cases of fraud or wrongdoing. For example, if someone gains title to property through fraud, a constructive trust might be imposed requiring them to hold the property in the trust for the rightful owner. So if your car is repossessed or whatever, you can take the documents and form them into a constructive trust and then have the car returned to you. Look, I already did a video about this. I forgot about the video I did. I was talking about oh my God, I've done so many videos. I forgot. But I did a video talking about trust and basically holding one side of the ledger. You got to collapse the ledger. Okay. They have one side of the ledger, and that's what's prosecuting you. You have to create your own side of the ledger. So if you sent a remittance coupon or you sent a draft to the bank, you have to have a ledger to show that they have not processed this instrument. You can't just keep doing stuff saying, oh, you're not doing nothing. When they're not processing it, you need to do a billing error and then go forward with that. Okay, resulting trusts are based on the presumed intent of the parties involved and are created to prevent a party from being unjustly enriched when an individual provides property or funds for a specific purpose, but that purpose is not fully fulfilled. Okay. So when you get a loan, the only reason you allowed the people to put a security interest into the property is because you were under the belief that you were going to receive a loan, which they don't have evidence that they provided directly or indirectly. Do you understand? So since they don't have evidence of this, that means that you're holding the high card and you just don't know. In essence, undeclared trusts are imposed by law to ensure fairness and prevent unjust enrichment, even in the absence of a formal trust agreement. So, this is what you have: the statutes, the FDCPA, you have state statutes, you have the USC, you have statutes under UFC, you have the UCC, which is the commercial code. Every state has its own individual UCC or the elements that it adopted of the UCC. Okay. So now we understand that if we have unexpressed trust, there still are laws and rules to allow us to sustain our interest into our property. Okay. So look, since we're talking about undefined entities, you want to have clarity of who you are and what your position is in the agreement. Now remember, in a credit card agreement, the bank that is issuing those statements, they are not the bank that actually is the beneficiary bank. What they are is a holder. Okay. So there's a servicer and a holder. So they're the ones that keep track of their books or their books in relations to you. So you have to keep track of your books in relations to them. Okay. Of what they owe. That's how you make a claim. Your books are how you make a claim. So look, consequences, personal liability. If you're an undefined entity or an undisclosed type of entity, this is why they try to tell you operate through trust or operate through some type of entity to basically to break the joinder from you in personal liability, or depends on how you structure things that allow you to kind of stay your personal liability. Owners or members of an undefined entity may face personal liability for business debts or obligations. So, whenever you get into a car loan, that's a business debt. And who's the business that owes the debt? They owe the debt to you. They have not paid you. You're only obligated to repay them after they pay you. So look, difficulty in legal proceedings. Now you wonder why you go into court and you have trouble. It's not just because you got to say you're a man or you got your birth certificate or you got to do a Form 56, but a Form 56 can be used to express trust, but they got to sign it. You got to sign that. So a person has to sign a Form 56 to accept it. Otherwise, it's just a piece of paper. So look, the entity may face difficulties in suing or being sued or entering into contracts. Doesn't that seem like you're having a problem where you gotta tap dance for credit for your credit score to go up? Of course, that's why, because you're an unexpressed entity. So you're not doing business as a sole proprietor. You're not doing business as any of these entities. So your tax structure is even messed up. Meaning, if you're doing it as an undefined legal entity, you, that's why you have problems with the IRS, the Department of Revenue, all of these people, because of the way that you're conducting business. Now it makes so much sense to me. Like after I read that Bible verse, I don't even know if I'm going to go into it on this. So, since you're acting as an unsecured creditor in a undisclosed legal entity, this is how they use it. So you have to know your rights, even if you do that. Okay, so look, this will tell you difficulty in legal proceeding, tax implications, the treatment. Oh, I didn't even read this part. I'm sorry, and I already got into the tax aspect. It's funny I didn't even read it. Okay, the tax treatment of an unidentified entity can be unclear, potentially leading to complications and disputes with tax authorities. This seems like everything you're going through, right? So you can structure yourself as a sole proprietor or a DBA or give yourself a power of attorney or structure a legal entity that keeps some distance or joinder, or you can operate as an individual and just clarify your terms. That's why I like this thing, because the more you learn, I want to learn more about how to operate as an individual, because I understand trust, I understand business, I understand everything else. But understanding how to operate as an individual without those barriers, in my opinion, makes you the strongest. So, look, to resolve the issue of an undefined entity, it is crucial to define its legal status by registering it to a specific entity type, such as a sole proprietorship, partnership, corporation, or LLC, or by clarifying its ownership and governance structures. See, you can clarify your ownership of a debt. You can clarify your ownership of the receivables or payment intangibles into accounts. You can clarify that the bank received your note and that you're the owner or the holder in due course of the note, and that the bank is holding the note in lieu of you or in lieu of their completion of the completion of the loan, which is consummation. So with these things, the more you read and the more you study, the more you'll understand how to assert your rights to specify what your position or what your rights are in the agreement. That's why I always tell you, read your agreement, because once you read your agreement, you can accept it and add terms to it that don't change the positions of the parties, or you can accept it under a certain condition. And with that being said, I want to thank everyone, and I appreciate all you guys and your patience. I'm working on the 4-1. I'm working on the 3-4 course, and I'm also working on the credit repair course. So there's going to be updates coming to all of these. So with that being said, I thank everybody, and you guys have a great day and a great weekend. Sure, why not? Why not have a great next week too? I'm out.